Hello and welcome to AFP. My name is Devane Desai and I'm joined as usual by Mr. David Goss, continuing our look back series through January, David, as we take some time off, but we didn't want to keep the content well dry. So we look back to some interviews that you and I did respectively a while back, and we'll call this the US based episode, the US focused episode. But I talked to Jimmy Conrad a while back about a lot of things. I met Jimmy when I was working with the EA Sports FIFA franchise, and he was really, really lovely person to meet at that time as I was finding my feet in the new industry. But he's remained a good friend, and we talked about a variety of U.S. soccer topics, including some run-ins with some coaches in his day. I know there's a great Octavio Zambrano anecdote that led to someone jumping in our DMs soon after, which was quite hilarious, David. But yeah,
I'm about to say that got us all a follower.
Yeah, it did. We'll let you guess who that is. But yeah, David, Jimmy's a great dude and enjoyed chatting with him. Who did you talk to?
Yeah, but I just want to echo, Jimmy is fantastic. There are not a lot of people you meet in this industry that are genuine, like the way they are. I think he's also a brilliant soccer mind, which is what I'm excited about with him, is he draws so many people in because of his energy, because of his sense of humor and all those things. But then he really does like help raise the level of the soccer conversation while doing that, which is exactly what we need. And I chatted with Andrew May, who's an academy coach at RSL. He was an academy coach at the LA Galaxy before that. I've known him for a number of years. I think he's one of the best youth coaches in the country. And he is someone who is using his life to build better players and better experiences for young soccer players in our country. And for anyone who watched the World Cup on the US or Canada side and said, what's next? Or how do we get from where they're at to where Argentina and Portugal and Spain are at? That's a lot of what we talked about. And Andrew's one of the people who's working on that. And I have a ton of respect for him as a professional. I'm fortunate enough to know him very well. I love watching his teams play wherever I've seen them.
Awesome. Yeah, two great interviews that we really enjoyed, and we hope you enjoyed them as well, and look forward to chatting with you all soon as we get back to live AFPs. But hope you enjoy these sit downs with Jimmy Conrad and Andrew May. And welcome back to a football podcast. Our guest today, an MLS Best 11 member, a member of the U.S. men's national team, a content creator. He's got more hats on than Carmelo Anthony and Cam Newton combined. It's Jimmy Conrad.
That's my favorite intro, I think, of all time. I appreciate that.
Jimmy, the first time we met, I think it was 2017 in Miami at a FIFA esports event. And you were busy at the time, much busier than I was, as I was behind the scenes and you're on camera. But we got to talking briefly about just your experiences in general. And since that time, you've been a well of information. And today I wanted to start with a name, and I wonder what you could tell me about him right off the hop.
Okay. I'm nervous now.
Okay. Let's go with Bob Gansler.
Oh, Bob Gansler. So he was the 1990 World Cup coach for us, the U.S., the first time we had qualified for the World Cup in 40 years. And so he was somebody that I admired from afar. I used to be a loyal subscriber to Soccer America when you get those print newspaper magazines that they'd send to your house. And so I knew a lot about Bob. I didn't necessarily know a lot about his playing style, but I was familiar, or his coaching style and how he liked his teams to play. But I was familiar with all the players and the fact that he was part of history, getting us back into the World Cup. And then I had a chance to play for him in 2003 with the Kansas City Wizards at the time when I got traded from the San Jose Earthquakes. And he is tough. He is a tough customer. You have to do a lot to try to please him. And even then, I don't feel like it's possible. I don't know if he's ever entirely pleased. And I think ultimately that toughened me up, and I think it helped prepare me for adversity down the line and not to maybe seek out approval from an authority figure in some ways, that I just had to go out there and put myself in a good position to make plays and just kind of focus on the here and now and not, I'm a bit of a people pleaser. I think that still comes out, in some ways. And even in the media career that I have now, I still like to make people smile and try to gain approval in some ways. But when it's your coach, it's different. It's a little bit more of an intimate relationship. And to give you a good example of our, let's say, tough love, I got named as the 2005 MLS Defender of the Year. And we found out the morning before they were going to announce it. And obviously, I'm buzzing. Everybody's really thrilled for me in the locker room. And as we head out to the training field, Bob pulls me aside and he says, I should probably set this up better. We're walking. It's kind of like a I don't know if you guys have Taster's Choice in Canada, but like this really soft, like from afar, it probably looks like this really intimate moment. This coach hits his arm around me.
Yeah.
He's telling me how great I am and all this stuff, But really what he tells me is, you only deserve that for 60% of the year.
Wow.
And that hurt me. It hurt me a lot. And then he went on to give the Defender of the Year for our team to another player. And he was really trying to send a message that it still wasn't good enough. And I went home. So you think you go home, you'd be proud of yourself. You're calling your parents, my wife, you're telling everybody that you got named MLS Defender of the Year. And obviously, in the big picture, it's an individual award. So, I'm more of a team guy, but it did reinforce, and it's something you can never take away from you, and really be kind of an example of, look what hard work can get you if you put your mind to it. But I went home, and I cried. I was upset that my coach, who I thought had my back, didn't really feel like he did have my back. But ultimately, he did. We worked through it. I don't remember actually ever talking about it, but he made amends for it, and he said some really nice things about me, ahead of the World Cup. And I think he thought he was preparing me to be even better, that wasn't good enough. And in some ways, I thank him for that, but it was hard at the time. So I think that's a piece of evidence for the tough love that him and I shared.
I mentioned Gansler because I've read in interviews you've done in the past, you cite that time period you mentioned as kind of a turning point for you in your career. Like the Preki gets hurt in Kansas City and the formation changes and you guys have to do something different. And that leads to something different for you where you're playing and maybe where your more natural position or where you want to play. You become an all-star, a Defender of the Year finalist. And it's that tough love approach from Bob Gansler that kind of helps you get there. But I wonder if we pivot to someone else and the coach you had right before that, and Frank Yallop, by all accounts, Frank Yallop and you yourself had a good relationship in San Jose, but that trade obviously might have been a surprise to you. But was there a big change? Was there a big gap? Did you find yourself gravitating more to that kind of tough love, or did you find yourself being able to be malleable and adapting to a situation?
I would like to say more the latter, that I was trying to please whoever was in charge in some ways. So malleable is probably the best way to describe it. I would like to think that with regard to Frank Yallop in particular, when he came into San Jose his first year in 2001, that was his first year ever as a head coach. And he, and to his credit, didn't try to pretend that he knew it all. And I love that part of him. I love that first year with him. We obviously had a special team. He did a very good job along with the organization of getting Jeff Agus. We won the Landon Donovan sweepstakes. We ended up winning MLS Cup that year. But we had a really hungry team. And what I loved about him is that he would push us, but he would say, hey, listen, I know you guys are out here because you love it. I know you're not out here to make money. I mean, obviously you're trying to pay bills, but it's not because you're making millions of dollars. You're doing it because you have a passion for the game. And he really tapped into that for that group in particular. And I remember something I'll always think about was that he gave us Wednesdays off. Like Wednesdays were completely off, which I thought was a really bold move. A lot of young coaches in particular are probably want to be control freaks. They want to control every element of it because they just don't know how to coach yet. But for him, it was the opposite. He had Dom Kinnear as an assistant who ended up being a very successful head coach in his time with San Jose and Houston Dynamo. And they just had a nice vibe about him. And we had a good, solid core guys. And I loved the Wednesdays off because for me in particular, it gave you a day of the week where the shine wasn't on, where you didn't have to perform. So you could either have that time off as a mental break, or you could use it to go work on your game, I would go into racquetball courts and kick the ball around or kick a tennis ball to keep continuing to sharpen my skills or work on a long ball. I couldn't hit a very good long ball consistently, let's say. So working on what that technique looked like, or go hit the weight room and not have any eyes on you. You had a day not to have that pressure to perform. And I love that. Now, his second year, after we had that success, we didn't have those Wednesdays off anymore. I feel like he got into his own head a little bit. Like he's
reading the press maybe?
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to ask him, but I really was always disappointed that we didn't stick with it. You know, it clearly worked in some ways, and it allowed, I'd say, other players who were dads maybe to spend some more time with their kids. He gave us those meaningful moments. And so that was, I always wondered that. I never actually followed up with him. I thought Frank was a good coach and very approachable. You know, you could talk to him. However, that being said, I broke my foot, you know, like into preseason, like a month into his tenure. And when I come back, full health, the team's on a 19-game unbeaten streak, and I couldn't get back into the team. And so I was starting to play. I was training well and all that stuff, and I went in there and I said, hey, what do I have to do to get back on the team? And so he just told me a list of things, and I wrote everything down because that's just how I am, man. Like, tell me what I got to do, and I'll do it. And so I wrote everything down, and fast forward 2 months later, and we're still kind of in the midst of the unbeaten streak, but there's some more cracks. We're not winning games, we're drawing a lot more of them. And I just needed to talk. I needed to have him listen to being frustrated. And I'm training well. I'm training maybe better than the other guys, but he didn't want to change anything up. And I respect that. But I showed him this list. I remember, clear as day, we were in Tampa. I didn't get to play, so I went for a run. And I came back in, and we had a talk. And I'm like, hey, I did all these things that you asked me to do, and I still can't get in the team. And he didn't know what to say. I don't think he'd ever really been around a player that was that maybe dedicated to getting better at their craft in that way, and maybe that OCD about it. So that was a good learning experience, I think, for both of us, and really informs how I'll coach as well in terms of how you communicate to players and how they absorb information. And I've learned little things from a lot of my coaches. But yeah, Frank Allop, I thought it was great. You know, he ended up winning. In 2003, they traded me away, and I was so bummed because we lost them in the playoffs. I really wanted to beat them to prove that they had made a bad decision, like any player would in that situation. And we were unfortunate to lose to them. That was the famous San Jose. They came back from 4 goals down against the Galaxy and won 5-4. We were playing the winner of that, and we thought we had the Galaxy for sure. We had the Galaxy's number, I think, for a couple of years there. And unfortunately, San Jose pulled it out, and they ended up coming back and beating us as well. So, yeah.
I'm pulling a bit of the Last Dance timeline jumping here, so forgive me if I jump from 1999 to 2006 and then back to 1997. But I do actually want to start at the very beginning, Jimmy, because we're in Canada, we're based in Canada. There's a lot of TFC alum involved in this podcast. And as I was going through your career, and I've noticed a very familiar name in Octavio Zambrano, who is coaching the Galaxy when you first tried to enter the lead. When you did the tryout, was he the coach observing that?
He was. Yeah, it's an interesting name you bring up. So I don't have very fond memories of Octavio Zambrano. He lied to my face a couple times, and it's hard when you're a young player and you're hungry for that attention and love in some ways. I should probably, is this a therapy session? I feel like we should be doing therapy right now. And I think there's a consistent theme here of me searching for approval. But I would say that when I went into, I didn't get drafted. We won the national championship at UCLA in 97, and there was 5 seniors. And the other 4 guys got drafted into MLS, and I didn't. And I was pretty heartbroken. I thought, I'm on the best college team in the country. How do I not get at least a sniff into a trial for an MLS team or get drafted or whatever? Now, that ended up being a blessing in disguise, and I can get into that in a second. But I went into the office with Ziggy Schmid, who was the coach, rest in peace. And I could tell that he knew that he should have done something more for me. Now, I was the one player that he didn't recruit out of those seniors. I was the walk-on. And he didn't make any promises to my family about getting me to a higher level. I'm sure he did that for the other guys. You know, once MLS starts and all this stuff, I'm going to make sure that your players or your kids go on to play in MLS. And so I know he worked very hard to get those guys drafted. He didn't have to do that for me. He didn't make any promises to my parents. And so when I went into his office to be like, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? He immediately picked up the phone and called Octavio and just got me to start training with the Galaxy. So I went there. And I thought I played really well. I was pretty proud of myself. I thought that I had done enough to warrant more consideration, more of a longer look. And he did as well. So there's this one day at the end of these 2 weeks, before they're leaving for Florida for the official, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, you can't see me, but the official preseason camp. So as I walk in for that last day, the equipment manager brings me a full bag of stuff. And he goes, hey, you're going to go to Florida with us. And everybody's buzzing for me at this point. And on the team at that point are Greg Vanney, Robin Fraser,
Legends.
Dan Cowlichman. I think these are familiar names for you guys.
We know them well, yeah.
And they're all defenders as well, right? So I think they were really looking out for me, and always had been looking out for me ever since that time when I won them over. That somebody like heart on his sleeve, giving everything that he can for the team type player. And then Matt Reese was there too. He had gotten drafted, and this is a really important part of the story. So at that point, go to practice. I am buzzing, man. I'm like looking through my stuff. I can't wait to go home. This is pre-cell phone, so tell my parents, my friends, and tell everybody. And Matt Reese, we're still UCLA kids. We're still trying to tie up our school stuff. We're still living on campus or whatever. Well, he leaves about 15 to 20 minutes before me. So he's getting back to campus before I'm going to get there. And as I walk out, I'm one of the last people to leave because I'm just can't believe it. They're giving me a pair of cleats. Like I don't have to buy a pair of cleats. I'm like, I'm just buzzing, dude. I mean, so if you can imagine this, I was a kid. I grew up in LA. And the Galaxy played inside the Rose Bowl. When I was a kid growing up, I played outside the Rose Bowl on where they park cars during big games. So I was always on the outside looking in, and to have the opportunity to maybe play for the team that plays inside the stadium was pretty surreal for me. So there's a lot of emotion tied up in the possibility of playing for the Galaxy. As I walk out, Octavio opens the door from his coach's office and says, "Hey, actually, can you leave your bag of stuff here because we don't know for sure if we can take you." And I said, "Oh, okay, yeah." So I went and sat back down. Well, they kind of explained it to me. I went and sat down and they brought me in, and this is kind of me sitting down there telling me this. And I said, "Well, what are you gonna say?"
Yeah.
Okay. So I just set my stuff down, and you don't know whether to cry yet because there's really nothing to cry about yet. You're like, oh, what's happening here? So I walk out, and now I'm a little like uncertain, and I don't know how to act. I don't want to tell anybody at this point until I know for sure. But to remind you of what Matt Reese was already 20 minutes ahead of me going back home. So I get back to UCLA, and I'm trying to just keep it cool, not say anything. And Matt Reese has told everybody. He's so excited for me because he knew I was a little crestfallen that I didn't get drafted. And he told everybody. Everybody's giving me high fives, pat me on the back, and coming over to going out of their way to come over to my apartment to say congratulations. And dude, at that point you're faking it. So Octavio told me, hey, we'll call you at 6 p.m. This is at noon or 1 p.m. or whatever. We'll call you at 6 p.m. and let you know whether you're going or not. So I'm just sitting there by the phone the whole time, waiting. 6 p.m. comes, nothing. No, nobody calls me. 7 p.m., I track down Octavio's number. I call, and he goes, "Yeah, you're not going. We'll see you in 2 weeks." And he hangs up.
Wow.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
Is that man management, Jimmy? Is that reverse man management? Not managing man at all?
I think he just didn't care. I just don't think he saw me as the player that I was going to be. I don't think he saw any of the potential. I think he probably had other people in mind. There's rumors that Octavio was a guy that was on the take, so, and I don't mean that in a way where anything illegal. He was just doing what I think happens a lot around the world. So I'll definitely preface
agent
with
deals.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he would take a cut of any player that they signed. So if a player signed for 100, he would tell that player, "Yeah, you're getting 90," and he'd take the 10. I think that's common practice, frankly, around the world. So I don't begrudge him for that, especially if that's how you grew up and that's the game that you know. But it wasn't helping me at all because I wasn't in a position to grease his pockets. I will say though, when I went down to the San Diego Flash, at that point, I was still training with the Galaxy when they came back, and I felt sorry for myself and worked through that. But I went down to the Flash, and that was the A-League at the time, which is probably comparable to USL Championship or similar level. And it was the best thing that ever could have happened to me. Had I been with the Galaxy right away and with the defenders I mentioned in front of me, Vanny, Frazier, Kalichman, Danny Pena, all these guys, I wouldn't have played. Sure, I would have gained some knowledge and to be around those guys and to see what it takes to be a professional, but I wouldn't have played. And I think that would have stunted my development a little bit. Instead, I go down to San Diego. Though I make barely any money and I'm sleeping on floors and eating top ramen and all that stuff, it's one of my favorite years as a pro because you have to really decide if you want it or not. And I played 30 games in 6 months. And because we were so close to the border, we got to play against Necaxa and the Zolos Cholos and a couple of Liga MX teams that were coming up to just for their training or their preseason or whatever. So you're adding some really meaningful games against some very good competition. And not only that, you learn what it takes to be a pro, how to prepare for a game, how to deal with adversity within a game, how to adapt to different formations and the players that are better than you. How do you defend a player that you know is better than you? How do you figure that stuff out? That's stuff that you probably can't get in training. You can maybe get a little bit of it, but you can't get it as consistently as you do when you play in games. So going down to the lower levels was a blessing in disguise. And what the best part about this, and I'm bringing this up because me and Joe Cannon, who was on that team as well, we both got called up to San Jose for a friendly, and we did well enough that they wanted to sign us the next year. And I got a call, and I think you'll recognize his name, but I got a call at my home from Ivan Gazidis, who's now...
No.
Yeah. Gazidis was he's like the deputy commissioner under...
Right.
I think it was Doug something. I can't remember the first name's commissioner's name. But he called and he said, hey, listen, San Jose wants to extend you an offer for $24,000 a year. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm so excited to get to be a professional athlete. I mean, the money, but whatever, it didn't matter so much as just the chance to be able to say I play in MLS. But he added, the Galaxy have also put in an offer for you as well. So you are in a unique position that you can sign for either team. And I said, the Galaxy? Now Octavio Zambrano wants me because somebody else wants me? I was like, this is some bullshit, dude. Like that, no. As much as I wanted to play in the Rose Bowl and I wanted to play for the Galaxy and I wanted to play for the team that is in the area where I grew up, I can absolutely not play for Octavio Zambrano. And so I signed with San Jose.
That's what you call a gangster, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Conrad, always a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, you guys asked about academies. You wanted to know about MLS academies. Where have they been? Where are they going? What's been successful? What hasn't? So I've racked my brain and found the expert. The one person to come on that knows this inside and out, has had so much success, continuing to push the envelope though. And that's Andrew May, RSL Academy staff coach. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
So Happy New Year to you. You're currently, I think, still in Southern California where you're from, but you are heading back to Salt Lake City in a little bit where you're currently coaching. And then, of course, you have a deep background coaching in Southern California as well. Give people a quick rundown on your background and what you've done.
Yeah, perfect. So born and raised here in Southern California, Orange County to be more specific. Have basically done everything, like every young player aspiring to be a professional. Didn't really happen for me. Had to go in different directions, and really enjoyed youth and really enjoyed coaching, and started doing that full time, very, very young. So now I'm entering my 20th season as a coach. So all my experiences, I think, have helped me. As you guys know, Southern California is a beast of its own. Done everything from grassroots to high schools to colleges. And then, of course, when the MLS academies came around, I got an opportunity to work with Chivas USA. You remember that one. And then went from there and worked at Strikers for a little bit, which is a club here with Matthew Hoppe and players like that. And then, went off to the Galaxy and was there for a few years with the Galaxy. And now I find myself in Utah, working with Real Salt Lake.
Southern California kid in Salt Lake City. That's the dream. That's what we all put together, right?
Yeah. So I've I beat the storm. I came here and back to California and enjoyed the beach for a little bit. And as I go back today, it'll be snowing.
So let's start with the big question that prompted this interview, and then we'll get into all the pieces of it. But we had a fan, Jason G, ask, I'd be interested to get your take on MLS academies across MLS. He said, where have they been? Where are they now? And what would you like to see going forward? And we've talked about that a little bit on the show, but you are now the expert. So let's start with where have they been? What would you say from your time with Chivas USA to what you see in RSL and around the league now? Where have MLS academies been and where are they now?
I mean, it's night and day now, where it's been, Chivas, going back there. Like I said, I had done grassroots before. I had done regular clubs and different things like that. And going to Chivas, there was a professional feel to it. But at the same time, we were training at a park in Bell Gardens, California here. And, yes, you have a certain connection with the first team, but in reality, there was a separation, right? You just kind of felt like a little bit better than normal club soccer. So we had to be creative, find different ways to connect everybody and do different things like that. But, like I said, I think that having experience moving from Chivas and seeing different academies, not only in this country, but across the world, you could see that we were still far behind in terms of infrastructure and everything. So although it was a step up for me and it was eye-opening for me, I could still see that it was, still needed massive, massive improvement and needed better infrastructure. That's for sure.
So let's start with facilities, because you mentioned the field, you talk about infrastructure. Not every academy around the world, right? I think San Lorenzo talks about they use 2 fields and a brick wall, but they've had, I think the last World Cup, they had the most players out of their academy in a World Cup, all of them obviously playing for Argentina. So it's not everything, but what have you seen in the jump in facilities and infrastructure? And maybe what are the keys that are necessary?
Yeah, so it's crazy. Like you said, a lot of European teams, they come here and they are blown away by the facilities. The amount of investment that has been put in, to these things. And you look at Austin's, you look at Atlanta's, Philly, and obviously at Salt Lake, we have everything. But it's incredible the amount of investment that has been put into these academies, and these guys are blown away by it. And that's just a testament to the owners and everything and the front office and everything to put those visions into place and for the improvement of youth development. And I just think that when I look at the infrastructure, when I look at the facilities, of course, that's only one piece of the pie, right? And there has to be different layers to it and how it all works, right? But I think that without that in place, I'm just not sure you can be taken as serious. I love San Lorenzo's example. I'm a big Argentinian fan as well. But yeah, the reality is you need a field, right? You need fields. You need your own area, because that's contact hours. That's an ability to train when you need to and work around those types of things. Not, this other club has it in, a half an hour and hey, you got to get off, or you're waiting for them to have your own facility is key, but then what you do with it is, a different story.
And obviously at RSL, you mentioned you guys have maybe the best in the country or in the league, across the US and Canada. Outside of those playing fields, what are the things that are important when you talk about weight rooms and video and all that stuff, even for players at a young level?
Yeah, that's the key, the contact hours that you're able to have. And so, at RSL having, the dormitories, right? So we have a living on the campus, right? So there's this living situation where the players are living together, they're eating together. We have a school there as well, right? So they go to a charter school that's on site. Everything is in the same location. And then from there, they go and train. The first team trains. The Monarchs are there as well. So everybody's in one central area. And when I talk about infrastructure, that's it. That's everything. The weight room, the video, the dorms, the school, the professional team right there for these young players. And that is what inspires them, that it's just within reach. And again, like I said, where I was at Chivas, yeah, it was it just didn't have it, right? You were worried about, could they get a ride to training? Where were their parents at? What were they eating? All the different distractions that come with being a teenager, and all those types of things. So this helps with contact hours. We can go on forever about contact hours and how important that is, but essentially your facility and infrastructure can help that.
You mentioned the residency at RSL. I was going to save this for later, but it fits in here. So my understanding is at RSL's academy, even if you live in Salt Lake, you live in the residency. Is that correct? So every player lives on the campus?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. We have a few that will commute, but yeah, like one or two, but yeah, mostly everybody lives there.
Then you have clubs in other cities. I think FC Cincinnati is one of them, where they don't really have any residency, and every player is a local player who comes and plays. Do you think a residency setup is the future 100% for every club, or is it just what works for RSL and Philly, but maybe is different for other people?
Yeah, I think it's different for everybody, and I say that because in Utah, there's to a certain degree there's an isolation, right, of clubs, of teams, and different things like that, and you need to bring in players. Like Arizona is a hot market for us. Good players have come out of there, and we will continue to use that. And we have RSL Arizona, which is down there. And so I think that is huge to have, but I don't think it's for everybody. It has to be the right situation. I think just having a place for the kids to stay is, again, it's just one piece. And if it fits your vision for your club, great. For RSL, it's perfect for us. And yeah, maybe not necessarily for San Jose Earthquakes or Portland or something like that. I know there's homestays, which is another thing I see a lot. And you want to talk about growth, look at those initiatives, right? Seattle did a really good initiative where they started having homestays, and guys like Danny Leyva had opportunities to go from Vegas to there, and so you can see that. Gianluca Busio, same, right? Homestay, and how that has benefited our youth development here. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the residency program, but again, how you're looking at your contact hours and bringing these top players and making them better.
So in hearing what you're saying, and I think sort of how I see it as well, is maybe if you're in a city like a Dallas, LA, and New York, where there are players that are all right there that can also get challenging games against each other without having to live somewhere, maybe those are the places where residency isn't as necessary. Is that how you see it?
Yeah. And there's of course, with technology and everything growing now in the world, and especially with kids doing these online schools and having these courses, and they're so used to it now, because school is a big piece of it, right? They still need an education. These are still young players, but they can supplement that with first team trainings, second team trainings, different things like that, because they're online school, right? So there's some scenarios where academies will put their top players in online programs and monitor them and different things like that. So again, that way they're able to, use more contact hours for their development plans individually for them, or just allowing them to get more training or more video or different things like that.
So in my mind, the next step of where academies have been, where are they now, is coaching. And you've talked about facilities and contact hours and all this. Then you have the coaches who, are the ones who kind of shape the players. What have you seen in the changes of maybe quality of coaches or coaching education and coaching ideas in MLS from when you started to where it stands now?
Well, I think the big thing that we see a lot now is ex-players, right? Ex-players working and getting their badges and going through those things and I've been able to work with some former ex-players that have been working on their licenses. And of course they're sitting here thinking, wow, this is actually really hard. Or, hey, I never thought about that. I just played, Mm-hmm. So the fact that education is there, I know there's a French course, right, that a lot of coaches have taken, academy directors courses. Of course, they revamped, U.S. Soccer's revamped the A licenses and all their licenses really. But so there's so much opportunity for knowledge out there. and we're seeing that people are interested in getting into the game and coaching. Coaches have to be knowledgeable. I like the fact that you kind of put them into these pieces, infrastructure, and all this type of stuff. But then the coaches, right? They're the heartbeat to me. And maybe I'm biased because I'm a coach, right? But they're the heartbeat of everything, right? You can have everything, but if you don't have a good teacher in front of you, you don't have a good instructor in front of you that understands how to teach, well, then everything could be lost, right? But yeah, it's good. Coaching education, ex-players, different things like that, I think has really, really helped.
Have there been any specific drastic changes of the way to coach players, game models, things that are focused on? Because I can just say from me, you watch a young player in this country 10 years ago to now, technically they're more proficient now. So it feels like something has changed, or maybe that's just the way I'm choosing to see it. I'm curious what you think.
No, I think you're spot on. There's a lot of coaches that are serious thinkers about the game. They want to be good at their craft. They're improving on it. And this is how I see coaching. Coaching is being able to convey your thoughts of the game to the players in a way that they can understand. And to me, that's the big, big key. I think within game models, within ways of teaching, there's hundreds of ways to do different things, right? And we can take from Spain, we can take from Germany, because that's what we do, right? We can take from England, and we can take all these different things, and we can say, oh, we want to play like them, or the Barcelona way, or, we can do all that. But the reality is, whichever one it is, the coaches have to be able to convey those ideas and thoughts to their players. And they have to have feel for that. I use a word, I'm going to say experience. My friends love when I talk about experience. Experience plays a role. And what I mean by that is when you're a young coach and you're starting out, you think I drew it up on the paper. It's going to be easy. No problem. Players will be able to do this. They'll be able to do that. That's how I see it. But remember, these are young players. These are young players that are, coming into a different environment where it's more and more competitive, and maybe you're used to being the best player on the team. They haven't really been coached. Like, all of a sudden these things hit you as a coach, and sometimes you freeze up as a young coach. I remember, I would use high school trainings as experiments. I know that sounds funny, but I'd use high school trainings as experiments to better myself. I would use different exercises. Did I like it? Did I not like it? Did the players like it? How did I deliver my message? And so I think that, although we have coaching education, although we have, all these licenses and things like that, it's experience. These new coaches have to get in front of the players, and they have to work with them. And they don't necessarily have to be high level players. That has nothing to do with coaching whatsoever. It's being in front of a group of players and being able to, convey those thoughts to them.
So the other part of conveying a thought is sometimes a player physically being able to understand you in terms of language. And one of the big conversations across North American soccer has always been, there are so many communities that aren't being tapped into, that aren't being given the opportunities. It feels, I think from the outside, for a lot of people, that what you and some of your coworkers did at Chivas and then the LA Galaxy was sort of the first time we saw, especially that Southern California, Mexican and Latin, background start to get opportunities in MLS. What do you see in terms of scouting, recruitment into all communities rather than maybe just the cliche communities that were being represented in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s in the pro soccer scene?
Let me first off by saying that having this pay to play and having these academies, again, invest so much money and opportunities for everybody, it without having a cost to it. Because look at for Real Salt Lake, we fly everywhere to go play teams. There's a massive cost to that most people wouldn't be able to afford. Most players wouldn't be able to afford or go to a charter school. So, first and foremost, that again is the growth of MLS academies, right? Being able to say, hey, we want you to play for us. We're investing in you. Everything is, virtually free of charge, right? So that's number one. But I guess to the second point of the question is whether or not I've seen the Latin culture get more opportunities. Yes, I have. I've seen it. We know that they're good players. I think we just need to get away from just athletes and that's it. I think I guess it's how you define athletes and athleticism. We can get into that another day, but just the fact that I have seen that, I think there's, you have guys like Hugo Perez as well, who's now with El Salvador and different things like that. Massive scouting everywhere because there's talented players in this country. But again, we're so big, but it's people knowing the markets. And that's key, knowing the markets, knowing that there's hotbeds here and just going out and finding them, and you see now a lot of clubs, again, where we've been and where we're going, you see that there's head of recruitment or head of scouting for academies. I'm not talking about first teams. We're talking about academies, and they're out there and they're looking and they're seeing, with affiliate clubs that they have, that clubs have or not. And doing partnerships with, of course, with all levels of soccer here in this country. So it can be from clubs, it can be from ODP, it can be from ID2, all these things. And the scouts are out there. So again, the investment is being put in to find these, and that's just giving more opportunity for players to be seen. And really, that's all they need. They just need opportunities to be seen, and the serious player that is dedicated to it, you'll know right away, when you're out there watching.
Andrew, thanks for taking the time to join us. Good luck in your snow venture coming forward, and we'll see you next time.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Amazing stuff with Andrew. I could have gone for 3 hours. We didn't talk about college soccer and homegrown territory rights and coaching development and coaching licensing and youth national teams and whether they matter anymore. And there's just so many places we could go. And I hope that we get to explore a lot of it here on AFP. That's what we're here for. That's why I love this show. So if you have more great questions about stuff like this or anything in the soccer world, like Jason G, you can go to our Discord. If you are a Patreon subscriber, and I urge you to be a Patreon subscriber, jump on the Discord, go to our hashtag AskAFP section and send in questions, because I'm always looking to be inspired for new interviews and who should we talk to and what should we talk about. So I really appreciate it when all of you tell us what you're passionate about and we can sort of learn about it together. And with that, that's the end of our show. So as I said, we'll be back with normal programming coming up next week. And thanks so much for listening, everyone, and have a great one. Happy New Year.